You might be interested in the US Army, but you're trying to figure out, should I go active duty? Should I go into the Army Reserves? Should I go into the Army National Guard? And to make that important decision, you need to know what is the difference between each of them. So stick around, because that's what I'm going to be providing you in this video, and that starts right now. If you want to join the United States Army, it's not as simple as just joining the Army. You're going to need to make sure that you're joining the component of the Army that's going to be best for you. Whether that's going to be on the active duty side, on the reserves, or the Army National Guard, because it's not all the same. They might have some things about each of them that is the same, but not everything is the same. So I want to make sure that I highlight the main differences between the three, so that way you can understand what is the difference and which one is best for you and your goals. I make videos about the US Army because I believe that the more you know about the US Army, the better your experience can be. If that's something that you want, then make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. Let's dive into things, because this very first one is probably the biggest difference, and that is one of them is full-time and the other two are part-time. If you join the Army on the active duty side, that means you're full-time. That means that the Army can send you where they need you, unless you get the option to actually pick your first duty station. And then you're gonna be working about 5 days a week from 7:30 in the morning to 5 p.m. on average. Of course, there will be times where you're gonna work even more, sometimes even less, because when you're on active duty, you can work any time of the day. Your common work schedule, though, is that 5-day-a-week kind of a schedule, unless you're like deployed, you're in the field, or you're one of those MOSs or those jobs. They have crazy schedules, such as like MPs and cooks. There's also some other random times that might require you to have a long day, but if you're gonna be going to the Reserves National Guard, then you don't have to worry about that. That's because the Reserves and National Guard, it's part-time, right? So you're gonna probably, still be living in your local area and then commute to wherever your unit's at when you have to go into work. You're gonna have what is known as drill in both the Reserves and National Guard. That is where you're gonna be required to come into work, let's say 2 days, right? You're gonna have to come in on a Saturday and a Sunday in the Reserves and National Guard, and then your unit's gonna coordinate like what you're gonna be doing for that month on that weekend. You'll also be required to work 2 weeks out of that year. Often those 2 weeks happens to be like when that Reserves National Guard unit is gonna have you go into the field. They might have some kind of other training you're gonna be doing, but somewhere in that year, you're also gonna have to come in for 2 weeks straight. That is a common schedule that you might have in the Army Reserves or the National Guard, but I've also seen like some other kind of differences in there, where like some units might have you come in for 3 days. Maybe you do a Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday. I've also seen times where they have soldiers come in for 4 days. You come in for, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then the next month you actually skip doing drill. There's even times where you might have to go off to like a school that takes like a month or more to be able to attend that school. And then when you do that, then now you've met that quota, that time frame that you need for that 2-week training, and you don't have to do that 2-week training. Some Reserves and National Guard units might have some crazy schedules that they kind of work out. You might even have times where you come up on orders to deploy, and then when you go in on those orders to deploy, it's basically like you're on active duty. But that'll be for like a set time frame where that deployment's 3 months, 6 months, whatever kind of a thing, and for that time period anyways, you're essentially kind of like active duty. Nonetheless though, the Reserves and the National Guard, that's part-time, while active duty, that's full-time. So being active duty or being part-time in the Reserves and National Guard does make a difference when it comes to pay, so that leads into the next big difference, pay. Since active duty is full-time, that means you're gonna get your full-time pay based on the rank that you are and that pay chart. So if you look at the current military pay chart, you can see what you're gonna make per month before taxes are taken out if you're gonna be going active duty. It's basically like being paid salary though, because it doesn't matter how much you work or how little you work, you're always just gonna have the same paycheck. If you're in the Reserves and National Guard, well, that's part-time, so you're gonna be getting paid based on how many days you do drill. So just as an example, if you are new, let's say in the Army Reserves, and you're at the rank of, let's say, an E2, which is still private, then you're gonna be making roughly about $286 after weekend drill before taxes get taken out. You're not making a lot, obviously, but most people don't join the Reserves and National Guard for the pay. They probably join for like the benefits, education, and experience. But the higher rank you are, the more money you can possibly make, which leads into the next big difference, and that is promotions. In many cases, it's easier to get promoted on active duty than it is to get promoted in the Reserves and National Guard, but let me explain why. In the Reserves or the National Guard, you still have to meet like the same requirements to get promoted as active duty does. Those requirements are things like, based on how long you've been in the Army, how long you've been at that rank before you're eligible to actually get promoted. Where it becomes difficult in the Reserves and National Guard side is that you have to worry about if there is actually a slot for you in that job at that next rank. It might not be too big of a deal when you're trying to go between the ranks of like E1 and E4, but it might become more of a struggle when you're wanting to go from like E4 to E5 in the Reserves and National Guard. Let's say that in this example, you're an 88 Mike in the Reserves and you're trying to get promoted from E4 to E5, which is a sergeant. Let's say that your unit is authorized to have 4 soldiers in the MOS of an 88 Mike at the rank of a sergeant, but it already has 4. So they're all full on 88 Mike sergeant slots, so that means in order for you to get promoted to sergeant, you're not gonna be able to do so until one of those sergeants that are currently in one of those slots either leaves or gets promoted. This can sometimes result in a soldier getting stuck at E4 for quite a long time because there is no available slots for them to get promoted in their unit. They do have some options. They could try to like transfer to another reserve unit that maybe does have a slot for them to go into, or they could even request to maybe reclass to another MOS, but it's usually common maybe if you have an individual that's been stuck in that situation for a really long time and their only way that they're gonna get promoted is they reclass to another MOS. So that's where it becomes difficult on the Reserves National Guard side because you have to be really dependent on that slot to be able to go into it. Where on active duty, they still have to worry about the slots, but it works a little bit differently. Because on active duty, they do still have slots where a unit is only authorized X amount of soldiers at that rank in this MOS, but it's a little bit different. So let me explain that. So let's say, same kind of example, right? You're an 88 Mike, you're trying to get promoted to E5, but all the E5 88 Mike slots in your unit are currently full. Well, as long as you meet those minimum requirements to be able to get promoted, you're gonna get promoted on active duty. That can result in like a unit being overstrength on soldiers in that MOS and that rank, but since you're active duty, they can just simply move you. It might take like a few months, it might take like a year, it really just depends on like a number of things, number of factors and stuff, but typically that means that, you know, they're gonna probably move you to another unit, maybe on that same installation, or if they want to and they have a slot for you at another duty station, whether that's stateside or overseas, they could possibly PCS you, send you to that other installation because they have a slot for you over there. So active duty, not quite the same, right? You still have those slots, but if you meet the requirements, you're gonna get promoted. Possibly if you're already full in those slots, get sent to another unit, but it's not quite that simple on reserve side. You know, they can't force you to move somewhere else, so you're gonna get held up kind of a thing. Typically when someone is trying to decide if you wanna go active duty, reserves, National Guard, it really comes down to if you wanna be like full-time or if you wanna be part-time Army because you still wanna go to school or you still wanna keep your current civilian job. What is your main deciding factor for your decision for, you know, wanting to go active duty, reserves, National Guard, or what was your main deciding factor if you're already in or maybe you're a veteran? Let me know down in the comment section down below. For me, I wanted to go active duty because I really didn't want to stay in my hometown and have to find another job to bring in some income. Because if you're not married and you go into like the reserves and National Guard, then you're gonna need to have some kind of other income source unless you just simply plan on living with mommy and daddy. Where if you're not married and you go active duty, well, the Army is gonna provide you with a room at the barracks. It might not be the greatest place to live, but sometimes it beats living with your parents. Now, by the way, I am wearing a Grunt Style long sleeve shirt. It even has a hoodie kind of a thing on this long sleeve shirt if you really need that, but you should check out Grunt Style's winter apparel. They've got a long sleeve, they've got hoodies, they've even got this pretty sweet Whoopie hoodie that's pretty comfortable. If it's your first time shopping with Grunt Style, you can even use my promo code CHAOSARMY and you can get 25% your entire first order. So make sure you check out that link down in the description box down below so that way you can get some nice winter apparel, some cool jackets, hoodies, long sleeves, whatever. Check out the link down in the description box. You might have noticed that the Reserves National Guard seem to be the same, and for the most part, they kind of are. I mean, they do have like a different purpose and a different mission, but without getting too complicated, the main difference between the Army Reserves and Army National Guard is that the Reserves is federally funded, just like active duty is, whereas the National Guard is state funded. So just kind of a different place they get their pool of money. Sometimes that comes into different factors as far as how they're able to conduct training, do different things, but that's kind of one of the big differences. There's other differences, but that's one of the main ones. Reserves, federally funded. National Guard, state funded. Another difference between like active duty, reserves, and National Guard is how they get promoted to like sergeant and staff sergeant. In the Reserves and National Guard, it's really just like a packet that they have to put together that kind of shows what they've done, and you know, kind of these higher ups can look at that packet and try to make the determination if this soldier is actually ready to move up to be a sergeant or a staff sergeant. On active duty, you're gonna have to get dressed up in that dress uniform. You have to go in front of a board where they're gonna ask you a bunch of questions. It's almost like a job interview that you're basically having to go through to answer all this stuff and try to make the determination if, you know, you're ready to become a sergeant or a staff sergeant. So a lot different than what the reserves have to go through. And if you are someone that maybe is thinking about going active duty, maybe you're currently active duty and you want to know how to be successful in the Army Promotion Board, well, I got a video right here that you should probably check out to learn all those tips. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like it, share it on social media, leave me a comment, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I'm Christopher Chaos. Stay frosty. See ya.